Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and we have a guest that we have invited to board our insane pirate ship for this journey. I don't know pirates well enough to do this, so I found somebody who does know pirates better than me, who's showing an entire stack of pirate books. Okay. Oh boy.
I didn't know there was that much pirate content.
There is so much pirate content. Guest, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us all about that pirate content?
Avast, ye mateys. I'm Andy, and I've been drinking a very strong alcoholic rum drink to get ready for this. And I love pirates. I love historical pirates. I love fictional pirates. I just held up some of, if you're watching on video, I held up a stack of some of my favorite historical pirate books. I have many more on digital, which I'm not holding up, but I am probably as well read as you can be without being an academic on the historical age of sail and the golden age of piracy. So I'm stoked that there's this fun, cool Star Wars pirate show to talk about.
We love that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to circle back and bring up something with you that I mentioned on a previous episode. And I said at the time, oh, I don't have the pirate knowledge to expand upon this topic, but maybe we'll find somebody who did. Spoilers, I knew Andy was coming on the show when I said that. I mentioned the concept of like the pirate ports and the pirate cities, and specifically I brought up Nassau as one that I knew. And I was wondering if you could give, just going back to episode 2, a little bit more detail on what those ports would have looked like and why they sort of formed.
Sure. So there was this thing called the British Empire, and it was bad. And it
historical understatement of the century, by the way. The British Empire was bad.
It did a lot of colonialism. At the same time, there was this thing called the French Empire, which was also bad, which was also doing a lot of colonialism. And France and England kept having these big wars with each other. And you know who got fucked real hard in that? The little guys. So
everybody.
If you were a British sailor, if you had fought against France in these big long wars, at the end of your service, they basically said, "Hey, get fucked. We're not paying you." Also, a lot of British sailors were like kidnapped and forced to join the Navy, and then they just like weren't paid afterwards. In France, there was a similar thing where they were enforcing sailors. There was also this culture called Buccaneers, where they would hang out on the beach and they would drink rum and they would hunt pigs, and they invented barbecue. And France would be like, "Hey, we need you guys to go fuck up England." And they'd be like, "Okay, cool, we'll go do that." And then when they were done, they would like go back to the beach and drink and cook their pigs. And so like these disenfranchised sailors and these disenfranchised like hunter frontiersmen would form these like settlements, which kind of grew into port cities, which kind of grew into like trade hubs, which kind of grew into like outlaw kingdoms. Nassau was one of them. Tortuga was another. And like, yeah, if you got screwed by England or screwed by France and your one trade was like, I know how to sail a ship real good, it wasn't a hop, skip, and a jump far away from I'm going to do some smuggling, I'm going to do some piracy, because what else am I going to do? It didn't help that both empires were hiring privateers, which was like, here is a license to commit piracy against everyone but us. And then at the end of the wars, we're like, yeah, we're going to need that license back. Like, you hired them to do piracy, and now you're like, ooh, don't do it anymore. And like, you think they're not gonna. So they needed places to stash their goods. They needed places to repair their ships. They needed places to fuck nasty. And these sort of cities popped up where they could do those things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you brought up kind of the concept of, you know, the British and the French and everything kind of have their fighting going on back in Europe over what is essentially global domination. And you have these sort of pirate groups that have sprung up in the Caribbean, and they're kind of doing their own thing. And they're both a response to the current political climate at the time, but they're also trying to sort of make do within that system. And I think something we see in Skeleton Crew visually and something we've seen throughout the Mandoverse, I think there's a reason that pirates keep coming up as a central theme, especially because we're out here sort of in the galaxy. The New Republic is not really able to like sweep in and deal with all of this. And you've got these sort of pirate settlements and things that have sort of popped up. We're literally looking in the video right now at Port Borgo in Bradley's monitor. And you can actually see that it looks like, there's cargo crates. It looks like there's cargo netting that's designed, it's there for aesthetics, but more importantly, it's there in universe for cargo to be placed in. And we see a lot of movement through this port. It's a pretty big port. I think it's really interesting in the visual cues of how they designed Port Borgo to feel like this place where there's been a lot of movement through it, and there continues to be a lot of moves. It feels like a very transitory space to me.
Prime requires infrastructure. Like you need someone keeping the books, you need someone refueling the ships. If we're talking Star Wars, you need someone who can like keep track of how much rations you have on the ship, how much medicine is on the ship. You require a lot of behind the scenes movement in order to do a piracy. So Port Borgo, I think, is a really fun look at that, even if like we don't sit down and talk with the administrators, but you can tell that there's some administration. They have these ferries going back and forth. They have these businesses set up, whether it's tattoo parlors or brothels or bars.
Cabaret. We discovered
we
this
found
last
out last
episode.
week.
That is a cabaret.
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 So we were denied our musical number, which we were both very upset about.
Yeah, that's very good.
No, and I was reading unrelatedly for a project that I'm working on. I did a little bit of research into how ships generally in the 17th and 18th centuries were set up. And one thing that really struck out to me was the importance of basically having an accountant on board.
Yeah.
And, again, you raise a point. We don't see them in Port Borgo, but like they clearly have systems of barter and trade set up internally. And yeah, they have stalls. We'll later see in this episode, to borrow from one of my notes that I'm just going to say now, that scene where they have what is basically like an emergency broadcast to where they're like, Silvo has escaped, search everything. They've established in the show that they have a pirate code, and even within Port Borgo, there is some semblance of order. They have a jail cell. They have a brick to put people in. They have dedicated security that looks like the security from The Force Awakens, which I thought was a nice touch. But they have dedicated security to kind of keep the peace at Borgo. And I do remember playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag 1,000 years ago. I do need to go back and finish it, but sort of the neutrality of the port, I think, was something that they brought up a lot in that, as well as I think in other pirate media, which Andy, I think you've consumed more than me. So,
I mean, do you guys want to go to Andy's Pirate Corner real quick? I can take you to Andy's Pirate Corner. You mentioned the code. The articles would have been something historically that every time the ship left port, they'd agree on a new set of articles for that journey. So captains would, suggest like, here's the articles that I want to like have the sailor sail under, and then the crew would argue and debate and edit and bring it back to the captain, and then the captain would argue and debate and edit until back and forth till everyone agreed, all right, these are the articles we're going to sail under, let's set sail. And the captain would be held to follow them. The captain was not a dictator on pirate ships. In fact, he was only in charge in combat. Otherwise, everything was up to a vote. Something that's really cool when you think about that is there were women on pirate ships. There were people of color on pirate ships. A lot of pirate ships in the New World were heavily made up of indigenous Americans and freed slaves. And their vote was equal with everyone else on the crew. So on pirate vessels, people of color, women, queer people had the right to vote earlier than they did anywhere else, which is pretty cool to think about. And I love that we see that with the pirate crews in the show. They're very diverse. There's tons of women, there's tons of aliens, there's tons of people of color in these pirate crews. And like, yeah, that's who's always made up pirate crews, is the marginalized.
Yeah, we're not going to talk
visibly
about them this
disabled.
episode, but I have two women pirate on the crew that we'll talk about at a later date. I don't have them on this week's episode, but because we haven't really gone into the crew yet too much, like actor wise. But I noticed that, yeah, they have like at least two that are in prominent positions on this crew.
I will also say that it's very interesting to me, bringing up sort of the point of pirates being marginalized, that within the context of the Star Wars universe, a lot of these pirates are alien. That we just came out of 20 years of what is essentially a human supremacist government. Now, canon, it's there. Like, it's very clear, especially if you read Thrawn 2017, if you read Aftermath, with the way that my beloved, when is he going to be on TV, Sanjay Rathvelis, talks about his time in the Empire. Do it in Ahsoka season 2. You literally did Mon Mothma in season 1. Anyway, the way he talks about it, but we came out of this very long human supremacist time. And so it's interesting that a lot of these pirate crews, even a few years after that, are still made up of a lot of aliens, a lot of people who would not have been anywhere close to the systems of power. And we see through the rest of the Mandoverse and the rest of the New Republic stuff that the New Republic, one of its many, many, many failures, is a continued failure to reconcile that disparity in their center of power. We don't really see a lot of aliens in governmental positions in The Mandalorian or any of the other stuff. And I think it's interesting here we see them a lot as part of these pirate crews. Just because historically they would have been denied those positions or any sort of leverage or benefit under the imperial system. That was a lot of pirates. Hey, before we dive into the episode, Andy, really quickly, we're going to plug at the end, but just in case people have their podcast app open now and want to find it, where else can we find pirate content from you?
Sure. I co-host a show with my friend Ronnie called Genders, Queers, and Buccaneers. We are very much a Black Sails podcast. We are reviewing the show episode by episode. By the time you're listening to this, we probably just wrapped up our coverage of season 2, which is my favorite season of any TV show ever. But on the horizon, we're going to be looking at one of the many Treasure Island adaptations for tackling the rest of Black Sails. So we're not only a Black Sails show podcast, we're going to be covering some other pirate media too, but Black Sails is our main focus. So if you haven't seen Black Sails and you want to hear Ronnie and I talk about Genders, Queers, and Buccaneers, you can watch it on Netflix. And it is a very queer, very political show. So it is rife for discussion. Looking at it through a lens of queerness, a lens of gender, and a political lens.
Yeah, Black Sails is one of those shows that people have been recommending to me for about 10 years, and I've just never gotten around to it. And the feedback, the overwhelming feedback from, I think it was either the episode 0 or episode 1 of this show, where I mentioned that, Andy, your posting might have convinced me to actually pull the trigger on it, have basically decreed that yes, as soon as I finish the god-awful train wreck of bad decisions and horrible writing that is the final 3 seasons of Elite, because I have to know how this shit ends, Black Sails is going to be the next one that I pick up. So I will definitely be listening to Genders, Queers, and Buccaneers
cool.
once I have been able to get into the show. But that's next. I'm going to give you space up front to plug. Bradley, you and I have a little bit of business. Before we dive into this episode. Very quickly, our friend Steph from Dark Side Divas has been listening along, and she knows that I'm a fucking pedant. And I also love to tell Bradley that he's wrong. So with regards to our comment that Smee, the character of SM33, Smee is a reference to the quote-unquote Disney movie. She says, quote, "Please tell Bradley that I bless his pretty little heart for saying SM33 spelling Smee is a reference to the Disney Peter Pan. Like maybe Smee wasn't a character in a play from 1904 and a book from 1911, end quote. And the reason I bring this up too, Bradley, is because I read that fucking book as a kid and I should not have."
I like how, well, first of all, I know it's a book, right? In my brain, like, I know it's a book first, I know it's a play second, and I know it's a Disney movie third. However, in the headcanon of my childhood,
No, okay.
it is
No.
a Disney animated movie first. It is a live action movie with some random characters. I don't even know who some of the actors are, but the boy who played Peter Pan in the version that I saw, I think it's 2000 something, was a gay awakening. That actor, whoever he is, bless his heart now, he's actually hot now as an adult. And he was older than me at the
I
time, so
believe
therefore
his
it's
name is
appropriate.
Jeremy Sumter.
Jeremy
And the
Sumpter,
reason I
that's
know
correct.
that is because you and I are around the same age.
Yes.
And I also had
Um,
an
Mhm.
unreasonably large crush, like as like a I didn't know
yes.
this at the time, as like a
Jason
5 or
Isaacs played
6 year
Hook
old.
in that too, by the way, and he was incredible
That's
as Hook.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I
just
was trying to
the
Yep.
remember
Grand
who was playing
Inquisitor
the other characters.
himself.
Yes, I was trying to
Yeah.
remember who played all the other characters, and you're right. Yeah. So anyway, that version of Peter Pan is seared into my brain, but obviously animated Disney version is gonna be up there. But the second thing is that fucking live action with Jeremy Sumter is like seared. Like I can't even talk
Seared
about
into
it.
your brain.
But
No,
that's
when I was
definitely
like,
number one.
my thing is when I was like 5 or 6, like we didn't know this because like I'm living in a deeply conservative, like deep South bubble. But clearly, in retrospect, what was going on was I had a massive, giant, childish crush on Peter Pan from the Disney animated movie because I made us rent that movie like over
Mm.
and over and over and over again. And at one point, we did read the book together,
Oh,
me
okay.
and my family. It was a very weird experience. And I think I blocked large sections of the actual book out just because I was like, this has nothing to do with the animated movie at all. I'm confused. I don't
Ugh.
understand it. Anyway, that's how I learned that adaptations change things.
This week we're talking about Skeleton Crew episode 3, very interesting as an astrogation problem, where a mysterious stranger offers to help our heroes. Andy, since you're our guest, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you think they could improve on?
One thing I liked about this episode is there are tons of very fun nods to pirate tropes in media and also historical pirates. I really, really think this show does a great job with that. And specifically this episode, there's tons of things to pick up on if you're looking for that sort of thing. One thing that they could have improved on is this show is frustratingly heterosexual. If you're doing a pirate show or a pirate movie, it should be pretty heavily queer coded, if not explicitly queer. And even rewatching it today to get ready for this podcast, like the one girl has two moms. Like, shut the fuck up. No, she doesn't. Like there is no time paid to that. Like it is a blink and you'll miss it sort of situation. So like fuck this show for doing the bare minimum and pretending like it did anything with it.
Charles, what about you?
One thing I really liked, Kim, generally, I thought Kim as a character is one of the more interesting concepts that they've come up with broadly for the show. I thought the idea of, yeah, like having somebody who lives in an observatory in Star Wars is wild to me. Like, of course somebody would do that. And of course, I also love that she's like this hyperspace route nerd, but she also reminds me of myself. So this is a ding on the whim personally attacks me personally counter to where, yeah, I also have stuff just lying around my house and it looks so messy, but when I clean it up, it still looks messy. One thing I could have improved on structurally, this episode feels like 2 episodes that are half length. We have the escape from Port Borgo and we have meeting Kim. And if you look at the arc of Jod's character, it makes sense. But in every other respect, it feels like we're dealing with 2 separate plot elements. I would have fixed this, I think, by introducing Kim at the start of the episode, just to have an idea of where we're going. And that way the whole plot could feel connected as opposed to just one guy's arc over 2 separate, like the back half of one adventure and a whole separate other adventure. Bradley, what about you? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
One thing I liked, I'm with you. I think just the character design of Kim I liked the most. I just love like the idea of just an owl person. Like
The
this is
puppet
not
is
the
so
first
good.
this is not the first owl-ish species that we've seen before, but I love just like it's a different type of owl person. Like I don't know what the other ones are called, but
The roommate with the pig man from
yes.
Resistance.
What is
Yeah.
that called?
I
Charles?
don't
You should
know.
know because one of your friends
Oh,
on the
Gazo.
podcast is one.
It's a Gazo. Yeah, that Hope from
Hope, right,
Gay Guys and Jedi, and that's who she plays on For Light and Dice.
right.
Yes, she plays
But
a
that
Gazo.
species is just a gonzo.
That
Is
is
that
a,
what it's called?
that Gazo.
Gonzo?
Gazo is a
Gazo.
Gonzo.
species. Okay.
Gozzo. The
Tall
Muppet is
owl.
Gonzo.
Gonzo.
Oh, that's
Is
what I was thinking of.
It's a tall bird person.
Person,
Yes,
right?
Gazos.
Yeah. What I
That's a
like.
species I actually fucking remember from
Okay, there
Resistance.
you go. I
Bradley.
like that character, but I love her in general just because she's like a normal, just I don't know, it's just like talking owl. I don't know why
We
that to
don't
me
know
is
her
like great.
species name, by the way.
Right, we don't know
The
what it is.
databank
Yeah.
specifically says her species has not yet been named,
And I love that. She's the
which
new
means
Yoda,
Pablo
you
Hidalgo
know?
will do it in a reference book somewhere.
Yeah, she is iconic, and like
She
the
is. I
puppet
love her.
looks so good, and I love the
Oh my
weird
God.
owl noises she makes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the voice actress for this because it was a shock to me who was actually voicing this character.
But I will say the one thing I would improve, I'm with you on the episode structuring, but the problem is I don't know how to improve it because the thing is like the escape from Port Borgo could have just gone in the last episode because that last episode was too short and this is where this belonged. The escape was supposed to be in the last episode to make it a general normal length episode. The problem is the Kh'ymm episode is what we'll call it, where they go to meet Kh'ymm and they get the coordinates. It's too short of an episode by itself. And so I don't know how to expand that episode to make it seem like unless they had her go on like or she had them go on like a mini quest like a side quest to like go get something for her so she would give them the coordinates kind of thing. I feel like that's the only way I could see to expand the episode to make it make sense. But other than that, I mean, I still loved it. So it's pretty good.
Alrighty, you want to take us into section 1?
In the first scene, we're back on At-Atten, where the parents are conferencing together about the missing kids. However, a safety droid arrives to update them on their status, but contact outside the barrier is forbidden, so they won't be able to ask the Republic for help.
I have no notes on this scene. I wish this were not the first indication that we got that KB has a medical condition, given that it's
I was
going to
gonna
be so
say.
important later in the show.
Well,
That's
this
my
is
one.
where you know how last week, or maybe was it last week? No, the first week, we talked about how each of the parents got an intro scene, essentially, except maybe a little bit on
Neil.
Neil's parents.
Because Neil sacrificed it so we could have a Star Wars Holiday Special reference, and I respect them for that.
Right. So Neil's parents don't get as much time as the other two do, but this one is where, like, if we were gonna get KB's moms, it's like, why didn't we get a fuller scene with them then here? Because we could, like, we needed to introduce them here. We needed to know who they are. Because as far as we're concerned, they could be friends, they could be sisters, they could be, you know what? We don't know. Like, they don't like explicitly say it, other than
I
it's
think
like we
they
know.
will. I think they will verbally confirm that it's their moms later in the show.
Later, right?
But yeah, you're definitely feeling like in this opening scene the very severe lack of an introduction to these two characters,
Yeah.
and I do think that hampers KB in the early episodes as well, because she's such a strong presence, especially later in this episode. Like, to not get that relationship, we'll see. We'll see how I feel when I get to the fucking hologram scene.
I hate it. Like there's a constant question with being a marginalized identity. Like, do you want no representation or do you want bad representation?
Right.
And like, I would rather no representation or bad representation over cowardly representation. And that's what this is. Like, this reeks of cowardice to me. Like, do it or don't. Like do it, and if it's bad, like, at least you tried, or like do it and maybe it's a home run. But to like halfway do it, to like hide it almost, where it's like a blink and you'll miss it platonic kiss in The Rise of Skywalker, or it's we're gonna have two women who are like less gay than Sabrina's aunts in Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Like, come on, just don't do it then.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. And like, as someone who's also a Star Trek fan, where like Star Trek is constantly knocking it out of the park with queer representation and like
I haven't gotten
unapologetic,
that far yet.
bold, proud queer representation in Star Trek for the past like 30 years. Like, come on, Star Wars. Like, catch up. Do something.
Not
There
to
was
spoil anything for you, Charles, but I literally just finished my rewatch of Discovery.
okay.
And like they literally like in there, they'll just casually like not even they don't even do anything like weird, but they're like, oh yeah, my wife, and it's a
Uh,
woman. Like she'll
I'm in
just
Tig,
say my
Tig
wife. Like,
TNG.
Notaro plays a butch engineer who like
I'm in
does gay
I'm
hate crimes to the gay engineer. It's amazing.
I'm in TNG, by the way, for context. I'm not in any of the new stuff. I'm in TNG currently. I was actually having this discussion. I've been having a couple of discussions in the past 48 hours or so on like Young Jedi Adventures because I watch that show when I'm upset. And so I watched some of it yesterday. Like I keep episodes in my back pocket and I'll watch them when I'm upset. And I was watching an episode of the show and I was like, this show has more balls than most of the Star Wars visual media. Like just in terms not only of like the messaging of the show, because it's kind of crazy we're doing a gentrification is bad episode in our Star Wars show for toddlers, but just the way that the galaxy in Young Jedi Adventures and the way that like Tanu and all that feels much more diverse than anything else the Star Wars is doing visually for live action. And they're so limited in how they can bring that across. And yet it feels more queer because there's more queer people present and they have, if not prominent roles, then attention is called to the fact, like Nash's moms, attention is called to the fact that those are Nash's mom in a way that I think KB, the stuff with her moms wasn't called attention to in the way that it needed to be, especially given how strong the characters are for the other parents in the show.
and I'll say part of the problem too, and I'm just going to talk about the actors real quick so you guys can give some more context to them. But
Yeah, who's
the
playing
the
KB's
characters
moms?
are interesting named wise. That's my other problem. So KB's moms are Mary or Mari and Gary or Gary. Like their names rhyme like that. So immediately my brain goes, oh, they're like sisters or something. Like they're not married because why would the two people on this planet who have the most similar names just be like, you know what? We're lesbians. Like, let's get together. Like,
I
like
wonder,
what?
I wonder now that you're saying their names are basically Mary and Gary.
Yeah,
I'm almost kind of wondering if like the roles were not written
I
to
I
be
think
queer to start out with,
I don't think they were.
and they just happened to cast two women for the roles.
I think that's what happened because the way that it's Mary Gary, like it's I don't know, it's a little weird,
Yeah,
but
It's
I
such
can.
horseshit. They're such cowards. Like Star Trek continually flexes on Star Wars when it comes to queer representation, and it makes me mad.
well, I'll give them their time to shine because we'll talk about the actors probably more so than we would ever any other show would ever talk about them. So,
Who's
uh,
playing these characters, Bradley?
sure.
Then we
So
can get back to pirates.
right. So Mary is being played by Cass Bouget. I think that's how you say her last name. She's known for the series All Mankind, Disjointed, and Transparent. Don't know if you remember that show from a while back.
I did not watch it because I'm not a huge Jeffrey Tambor fan.
Oh, okay. Well, then there you go. And then Gary or Gare, whatever. I'm trying to give it like a fancy name, like Star Warsy name, instead of just Gary. But is played by MJ Kang. She's known for her roles in the 1997 television series Riverdale, not the new one, Gangnam Project, and SEAL Team. So there you go.
Okay.
Also, not the actor's fault.
Right.
This
right,
is
right.
this is a writing issue
Correct.
and a systemic Star Wars issue.
Yeah, I think it's also just I don't know if it's just like the writers' rooms now, unless you have a queer person on your writing team, I don't know if they necessarily know how to do it in a way where it feels non-pandering and more like just natural. I think the problem is in the writing of we didn't introduce them and give them time to be introduced. That's all it really is. I think there's nothing wrong with her having two moms, but it's like don't shoehorn it in as we changed the casting last minute
Well,
because
like
whatever, you know.
if there was an actual queer character in the show, like a character who was like named and had agency and affected the plot, I would not care that KB has lesbian moms who don't do shit and who aren't named and who are not clearly
Right.
lesbians, because I'd be like, oh, like there was this really great queer character over here who like did a bunch of awesome shit. The problem is that like the only queer characters in this show are, I mean, moms whose names aren't said that I
Yeah, they're not really sad.
caught, and they're not established to be like actually a couple in the episode, and they don't do anything. Like that's where the problem is. Where like if you look at the
Right.
queer representation in Star Trek, you know, you mentioned Discovery, you have multiple flavors of queer character who like the queerness is central to who they are. They affect the plot, they have jobs, they are not just one-note characters, they have
Right.
depth. You have Tig Notaro, you have the twink engineer, you have the really sexy doctor, you have like the two trans kids. Like it rules. One of them's a worm. It's awesome. And like Star Wars can't do shit. And that
I'm
was
trying not to
one Trek
spoil too
show.
much for Charles because I really want him to watch Discovery, but
That was one Trek show.
yeah, it was all in one show. It's great.
Yeah, and I will say, even I'll say this, and we gotta move on to the next section, or we'll never get through this. Even the Acolyte, for all of its fault, all of the flaws of the Acolyte, and we gave the Acolyte what I consider to be a very fair coverage that we ultimately ended up liking the show. But for all of its faults, it had queer characters where the queerness, if not front and center, was clearly part of the character. You know, Coral and Anastasia, they were both interesting. They were two interesting characters who were given time to breathe and explore that relationship. Maybe not quite with some of the elements that I thought needed to be in it, but it was there. And that relationship also would not have worked within the context of that story if it had not been two women. And
Can I say one more thing about queerness?
Absolutely.
So, I think another reason why this sucks is because it's a pirate show, and like pirates are inherently gay. Like pirates are gay. Every pirate you've ever seen in a movie is gay. Pirates had a form of gay marriage called matlage, where you and your gay pirate husband, if one of you was killed, you got their life insurance. They had like a form of life insurance, and it was like you would have to swear vows to each other, like in front of the crew. Like they had a whole ceremony for it. And like, I'm not saying every pirate crew had this. I'm not saying every pirate historically was gay, but this was a very common practice on pirate crews that were like included in their articles. And we have copies of them where like there are historians who are like, this was a platonic ceremony of best friends where they would swear devotion to each other, and they would sleep together, and you would get the possessions of your best buddy when he died. And it's like, no, they're gay. Like they're gay, buddy. This is a marriage ceremony. And so like to have what I consider to be like a very queer topic at the center, you know, it's the Star Wars pirate show, and to be like this cowardly form of representation pisses me off because it's pretty integral to historical piracy.
Before we move on, sorry, I forgot we have to talk about Numa too. Neil's mom. I have her as well. Real quick. Played by a woman named Geneva Carr. So throwing that out there, that's amazing name, first of all, because that was also the name of a drag queen on season 16 of RuPaul's Drag Race was Geneva Carr. But she was best known for the CBS series Bull and a slew of multiple roles in multiple iterations of Law and Order. So she's like the multiverse person of Law and Order.
Okay.
Like she plays multiple characters. And then she's also been on Broadway in a show called Hand to God, where she won a Tony for nomination for Best Actress in a Play. So another Broadway person. So now we have Fern's mom and Neil's mom were both on Broadway. No, I'm sorry. Fern's mom was did Shakespeare. That's right.
Fern's mom did Shakespeare. The cabaret person.
The cabaret person, yes.
Did Broadway.
And
now we have another
now Neil's
Broadway.
mom. So where is our Broadway / Shakespearean number? I don't know. But anyway, we should probably move on to the
next section. Let's go.
In the next scene, the kids and Jod begin their escape from the brig. While Wim blindly trusts a Jedi, Fern is suspicious. Once they make it back to the ship, the kids convince Jod to rescue SM-33, just as the rest of the pirates discover that there's been a prison break. Jod soon finds SM-33, but is confronted by his old pirate friend.
One tiny detail that I will note quickly with the opening shot of this section, I love that they have designed the shields to look like lapping waves.
Oh,
that is a fucking cool ass detail. Another cool ass detail, and we need to bring this back up because we got to relitigate this again, Bradley. I'm sorry, Andy, but we litigated this before and we got to litigate this again.
I got rum. I'm good.
Spoken like a true pirate. Why the fuck are Jawas here?
Oh, I didn't see any Jawas. But maybe
there is a shot of Jawas. Why are Jawas here?
they're living their best life. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe they like Port Burgo. I don't know.
Tatooine is a pretty popular port.
It is. It's got several. Anchorhead, Mos Eisley. I don't know if Mos Espa's a
They probably
port.
just hopped on a ship,
Yeah.
They're just living there. Maybe,
Okay.
you know what? My headcanon now, I don't know how old Jawas can be or how long they get, but these two Jawas are teens in their culture, and they decided to run away and start their new life as pirates.
Oh my God. Why didn't we get a pirate Jawa?
I don't know. That would have been really funny.
If I may take you to Andy's Pirate Corner for this section, we the bird frogman who confronts Jod, he has a cane. He's got a limp. SM-33 has like a peg leg. We see multiple pirates with like eye patches and cybernetics. And the reason why pirates and like disability go hand in hand is one, we live in an ableist society which villainizes those who are visibly disabled. But two, pirates had health insurance. Based on the injury you suffered, you would get a payout. So they had different prices for each finger. They had different prices per dominant or non-dominant hand, dominant, non-dominant leg, which eye, both eyes, etc. And like you would get a higher percentage of the cash if you were injured taking it, and you were also not kicked off the crew. They would take care of you, and you would be like compensated, regularly for each haul, even if you were disabled. So like, why do pirates have peg legs and hook hands and eye patches? Because they didn't fucking kick you out when you got hurt. They took care of you. And I love that this show is doing that, but in a Star Wars-y way. I think that's a great nod to historical piracy.
Yeah, and we saw that Ishi Tib get shot through the eye in episode 1 and has an eye patch for the rest of the series.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You visibly see that. Speaking of Benjar Pranic, that guy's name is Benjar Pranic. Bradley, I don't know, did you look up who is voicing Benjar Pranic? Because I looked on a LARP and absolutely got my early 2000s internal child just
I randomly didn't have him on here.
That's Alfred Molina, aka Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't find like a big pirate thing that he was in, but to be fair, he does have 226 acting credits.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm sure he's played a pirate before.
That man be working.
Yeah, he is most known. I was like, I'm going to see who's the voice of this guy. No, it's fucking Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2.
That's actually really great.
I do want to talk about as well really quickly the pretty much immediate reveal that Jude Law is Silvo. I love that the show does a thing that I think good Star Wars shows do, where it sets up like a very obvious mystery and then doesn't waste our fucking time with it.
Right.
Because they were like, oh, I wonder who the mysterious masked guy in episode 1 is, and who's this guy and it's the same fucking guy.
Yeah, it's
like,
Jude
we
Law.
know it's the same fucking guy. That's not the mystery. The mystery is, can you trust him, and why or why not? To which the answer is no, you cannot trust him.
I would disagree. I think the answer is yes, because he's hot.
I mean, that could be said for just about anything, but
that's true.
Brutus is also very hot. I would be
was gonna say,
very
there you
torn. I would be, oh man, which hottie do I go with?
The
If I was
Eternal
on that
Star
crew, I would be so divided.
right.
Oh yeah, no, Brutus.
My dads are fighting. What if they kissed and made up?
Exactly.
And I watched.
Never thought I'd be saying that about the Wolfman, but Star Wars does this to me. I've learned things about myself as a Star Wars fan over the last few years. I never thought, would I fuck the giant lizard man? Yes. Yes, I actually would. Skier, specifically from the High Republic, was the one that made me go, would I fuck the giant lizard man? And the answer was yes. So now I'm reevaluating my relationship with Bosk.
Bosk is hot.
I'm coming to that conclusion.
Yeah, Bosk is really hot.
It's something about the tongue.
I was about to say it's the tongue. Anyway, moving on. Bradley, what's the next section? Bradley.
We do get the classic, 2 little notes. We get the classic, you came here in that thing. Not the only reference to the original trilogy in this, but it's nice. And I do have to point out, too, it is wonderful to see Matthew Wood voicing a battle droid in any context.
Oh, yeah.
I love to see him.
No, I love the quote, too. So when they're in the little little droid depot section where SM-33 is being held, he's turning on the different droids to see like, are you SM-33? Are you SM-33? And the battle droid, he turns on a battle droid, and the battle droid goes, "Did we win?" And then he shuts it off immediately, and it's so funny.
That's adorable.
One thing the
Crack
show
up.
absolutely nails is its visual comedy.
Mhm.
Absolutely fucking nails its comic timing. I think I laughed at every moment I was supposed to laugh at, and I can't really say that for every TV show I watched.
I have one last thing about the droids because the
Okay.
first droid he turns on who can't see, he turns the droid on and he's like, "Oh no, I'm blind, I can't see anything." But what is that a reference to something where the droid says like, "Oh, I have to save the prince," or there's like a
No,
prince that needs to be
it's
saved?
just a weird, funny moment.
Okay, I thought that was maybe like a Legends thing or some
It's
weird thing
not
that
a
you would
Legends
know, but
thing.
okay,
Nope.
that you know
Nope.
of. Got
That
it.
I know of. I don't even know
Right.
all of Legends, Bradley. I'm
Okay.
I'm not a walking
If
encyclopedia
someone
of
out there
everything.
knows about a story where a droid that looks like that had to save a prince in some kind of thing,
DM
please
me
let
and
me
tell
know.
me. I just have my continuing gripes with the lack of bisexuality in Ben Skywalker. But we need to move on, or that's going to be a tangent.
That's a different show.
I have a lot of opinions about how they made my childhood crush straight. Moving on.
In the next scene, back on the ship, the kids argue whether or not Jod is a Jedi. The pirates are pursuing him as he races back to the ship in a dinghy, and once on board, the ship manages to narrowly escape the pirates, causing mass destruction at the port in the process. In hyperspace, SM-33 is suspicious of Jod when he finds him rummaging through the ship, and the kids discuss if the treasure on At-Aten is real before they head to bed as they travel to see Jod's friend who might be able to help them.
One thing the show does do really well is the kids' dialogue. It continues to be excellent writing for the kids.
And the actors do a phenomenal job. I don't know where they got these kids, but all these kids can act, and I think they're all going to have pretty awesome careers ahead of them if they
I
want to
agree.
pursue acting.
Do you want to know where they found them? Because we can actually tell you where they found them.
Oh, sure. Where'd they find them?
Other Disney shows.
Oh,
Pretty
nice.
much
Yes,
all of them
obviously.
except I think Neil's actor.
Neil, yeah.
Pretty much all of them have previously appeared in a Disney property. And they found all the adults in Spider-Man. Because basically all the adults were in one of the Spider-Man movies.
I love that the pirate ships have their flags painted on their hulls rather than, flying actual Jolly Rogers. We saw that with Thrawn in Rebels, but I really love the idea of like painting the Jolly Roger on the hull because there's no air in space. Flags wouldn't work. It's just a great touch. And I believe we see a lot of hammocks.
But there's explosions in space, so how is there not air in space?
God, I'm so tired of the fire
I'm
conversation.
just kidding.
It's
I really
still
like it.
happening. It's still happening. I'm still hearing it. And I'm like, go watch A New Hope. The Death Star explodes. It's because it looked pretty and it does storytelling thing and communicate to audience. I do love though that Andy did point this out. I do love that sometimes Star Wars will like do the same thing but adapted to be in space, which is the painting the flags on the hull. I haven't stared too long at all the ships in Port Borgo, but I really need to go through and like study them.
So hammocks, Andy's pirate corner. Sailors in European sailors would sleep on the floor of ships in like cuddle piles until they found the New World and they met indigenous people, and the indigenous people were like, "This is a hammock, you dumb fucks," and all of the sailors were like, "Beds don't work on ships because waves, but hammocks work on ships," and that's like
Ooh.
why sailors started sleeping on hammocks.
That makes a lot of
But
sense.
like hammocks are what pirates sleep on, and I like that there's hammocks in this show. It makes me happy.
The Onyx Sender, spoilers, the ship is called the Onyx Sender. The Onyx Sender feels like a very lived in ship. And that's something I really like about the design of it. It feels like a ship that you're meant to be on for extended periods of time.
It's a great hero ship too. Like I would, it's not quite the Ghost for me, which is my favorite hero ship in Star Wars, but I would put this pretty close to like Mando's ship or maybe like right under the Falcon. Like it's a really great hero
Yeah,
ship.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's very lived in. That's why, yeah, it seems real. Like it just seems like a real ship. Like there's something about it. But yeah, I'd probably put it under Mando because at least from what we know, Mando's at least has a toilet. So I mean,
That's true. Or a
I'm sorry,
fresher
what-
is
sorry,
important.
They
refresher,
did make a
sorry.
point. I love how little of a fuck Jod gives about the whole hyperspace issue to where like I also love when Star Wars stories play very fast and loose with hyperspace because it's such a weird space fantasy concept
It's magic.
that you can have fun with. And if you're imposing rules and complaining because something broke the technical specifications of how, no, they go into another dimension. Like that's how this works. And I love that he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go to fucking hyperspace with the fuel line attack. I'm gonna drive off with the gas pump still in the car. Like he basically floors it to Andre with the gas pump still on and absolutely wreck shit on this port.
Unrelated, but side note, I'm a devout Star Wars tabletop gamer, and I really, really need like Jod and Brutus and like the pirate crew to be added to Shatterpoint like yesterday, please. For the people listening who are big nerds like me and play Star Wars Warhammer, they know what I'm talking about and they agree with me.
I keep walking by the booths at various cons that have at vendor halls that sell the Star Wars miniatures, and I'm like, do I want to? But then I think about all the fights I have with my boyfriend about the shelf space for the Legos and the books that I already collect. And I'm like, do I want to get into another hobby that takes up physical? No, I think I'd like to keep my boyfriend.
That's fair.
Which I feel like is the choice I'm going to get. Speaking of pirate stuff, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I do want to point out SM33 does say he can't remember no AT-AT. Keep that in mind. There's a sequence, Andy, that I specifically thought of you and I wrote it down. I would have had no notes about this, except that I knew we were bringing you on for this episode. And it is the sequence in which Jod finds the dueling pirates that have killed each other and immediately starts stealing all of their stuff. He steals boots, he steals jacket, he
measuring
steals
the boot,
the
taking the
knife.
jacket, taking the knife. It's good.
Was that like a thing with pirates that like stuff would pass on or you could get other people's stuff if they died?
So like anything of like monetary value had to be pooled and then distributed. In like if you were a sailor, you for the Navy, odds are you might have been kidnapped and press ganged into service, and then like you really weren't getting paid. You were maybe making like 1/20th, 1/50th, or zero compared to like what the captain made. On pirate crews, captains got 2 shares typically. And then like officers of note got a share and a half or a share and a quarter. And then the seamen got 1 share. So like much more equitable compared to what the Navy was making. But then things like clothing, weapons, those would have been kind of up to you to grab if you killed the person. So Jod kind of going around and being like, do these boots fit? Like, are these nicer than my boots? This knife is pretty sweet, I'll take it. This jacket is pretty dope, I'll take it. It does remind me of a scene in Black Sails where one of the main characters, Captain Flint, he has like kind of the classic pirate captain's coat all throughout season 1. At the start of season 2, he doesn't have a coat anymore. It gets lost in like a shipwreck. And for the first half of season 2, he is going around without a jacket, just his cool pirate blouse. And he goes to the captain's quarters and he opens up the dead captain's wardrobe and he takes out the dopest, sickest coat and he puts it back on, and it's this like the theme starts playing and it's like, fuck yeah, he's Captain Flint again, and it rules. And so Jod going and finding the coat and putting it on, to me just harken back to Black Sails of that visual of like, yeah, it's the mantle of captaincy. Jod might not be captain right now, but like it is only a matter of time.
It is only a matter of time. Yeah, I'm having the exact opposite thing going on with my character on For Light and Dice, actually, which is really funny because they're determined like to keep their jacket that they started with. So they now have a different shirt, different pants, different boots. They're no longer wearing their gloves. They're insistent, like this ratty brown jacket that they started the campaign with. They are determined to keep. And I don't know why they've hyperfixated on this jacket specifically. I'm sure somebody could probably listen to the show and give it an interpretation. I'm not going to, but I just find it funny that we're having the exact opposite problem. Hey, that's a show in which Bradley technically plays a pirate. I just realized.
That's correct, actually. Yeah, I guess I am a pirate.
You play a Australian Weequay pirate on that show. Bradley plays the character of Kosov. which was one of the Nile Tempest runners on that show. My final note for this section, actually, no, I have two more notes for this section. One of them is I really loved the exchange between Jod and SM33 looking for something, found something, because it reminded me of looking for someone, found someone you have. So I love when the new shows, I love when they're subtle about their references to old Star Wars. This is part of my beef with the Filoni Favreau duo is they're very, hey, look at this thing that was in Star Wars. And I'm much more of a, oh, hey, that's like poetry, that rhymes kind of person. I also love, and I have to point this out, knowing where the plot of this is going to go, Neil and Wim basically putting together the entire central mystery over dinner is the funniest fucking thing in hindsight.
Yeah, those kids are smart.
Those kids are smart. If they were just given the time to talk to each other, they could probably work this out. But no, we have to move on to unnamed moon world. I don't think we know what this moon is called.
Yeah, I don't think it ever gets a name. Even in my notes, I don't think I put it in my little thing or anything. So,
well, and it opens up, I was going to mention this next week, but I'll mention it now because Andy probably had some insight on it. I mentioned to you, Bradley, multiple times because, surprise listeners, Bradley and I are friends. We do talk outside of recording this show, and we do talk about Star Wars outside of recording this show. I brought up the point to you multiple times, Bradley, that island hopping is a trope in pirate stories, that you go from island to island to island to island before you get to your destination island. This is the first island that they go to.
So I think what this trope really is to me is for sure like island hopping is a thing, and like you never get straight to your destination. You have to stop at multiple places along the way to resupply or whatnot. There's a real trope in pirate stories or in stories about the Age of Sail where like you need an astronomer. You need someone to like who can figure out the stars because that's how you navigate. And it's the same way with navigating in space. Like you need someone who looks at the stars and in Star Wars knows like the hyperspace routes. So it's fantastic that an astronomer serves like dual purpose in both mediums. And I love that they go to a weird astronomer who is like a classic trope in those sort of fantasy pirate stories too.
Yeah, and just thinking about like how difficult it would be to do that just by looking at the stars because of the way that light travels. Because you never know. You're having to have these predictive models, and we know that's how stars work in Star Wars, is they work the same like stars elsewhere, is that travels. So a planet you're looking at, there's a fucking wonderful scene that, look, when Star Wars hits, Star Wars hits. And this was one that really hit for me. There's a wonderful scene in one of the comics runs where Luke and Leia go to another planet, and they're on a beach, and they're lying on a beach, and they're looking up at the stars. And Leia points to one of them and goes, that's Alderaan. That's the planet of Alderaan. The light hasn't died yet. The planet's not there, but because the light hasn't traveled far enough to where we are, it looks like it still is. And I was like, oh God, when they do a moment right, they do a moment right.
in the next scene, the group lands on a moon to meet with Jod's old friend Kh'ymm. He warns the kids that she might not be that trustworthy. She claims to have maps for every hyperspace route in the galaxy, but At-Aten seems to be a problem. She explains why their planet is hidden. She begins to narrow down the coordinates when Jod becomes suspicious of her. He attacks once he hears the X-Wing chatter on the radio, and Kh'ymm warns the kids not to trust him. After being exposed as a scoundrel, Jod makes a deal with the kids to get home in exchange for a little reward. The X-Wings arrive and begin pursuit, and the kids help evade by using the ship's turret. KB enters the coordinates, and the ship jumps away.
Once again, talking about, the notions of setup and payoff and good writing and how we want to set something up, kind of even to the side, that's going to come back later. First look at the cargo lift. That's going to be very important in the back half. Is the cargo lift. We get our first look at it here. And we even get verbal confirmation from Jod what it's supposed to be. I also love, I have to point this out, the shot specifically where they're walking in front of the moon. It reminded me, it's a great shot. It reminded me both of a movie it reminded me of a movie I really liked and a movie I really hated. It reminded me both of The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
Which I'm currently re-listening to Andy Serkis read me the entirety of Lord of the Rings. I'm on the Two Towers right now. I forgot why these are my second favorite books of all time, only beaten by Dracula. However, it's funny you keep bringing up Star Trek, Andy, because this also reminded me of Star Trek V. and the
Star Trek
Uhura
5 is
show.
great, and you're wrong.
Oh no, no, it's Star Trek 5 that's wrong. Everything about it, everything about the back half of that movie is incorrect.
Agree to disagree. You're just not brave enough to understand it.
Then call me a coward because I'm correct in my cowardice. But it reminded me of those two shots, which I really liked. The one of Uhura up against the moon where she's being framed by the moon on the dune. You know the shot if you've seen the
Oh,
movie.
yeah. It's a great shot.
It is an unironically great shot. Weird scene, but great shot. Hey, Bradley, who played Kh'ymm?
Kh'ymm is being played by Alia Shakwat. Is that how you say her last name? Hopefully.
Shaka, I think is how it wants to be. We are famously bad at last names.
We're bad. Love you,
Alia
girl. Sorry.
Shakat, I think is how you say her name.
Correct. She is best known for her roles in the series State of Grace and Arrested Development. I most recently saw her on the current season of Severance, which I just started because Gwendolyn Christie's on the most recent episode of Severance. And so I was like, I'm going to watch the show now. And I caught up and she was randomly on the show too. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I know her best as Maybe from Arrested Development.
I think
that's who I was like, because I checked it and I was checking it because I knew she was going to come up this episode. I was like, oh my fucking God, she's Maybe? That was not who I was expecting. I was expecting somebody much older voicing Kh'ymm, which is incredible voice work. Also, if you were on Tumblr back when Hamilton was coming out and you saw the drunk history that they did with Lin-Manuel Miranda, she is Alexander Hamilton.
Phenomenal.
That's fine.
To, I believe, Audrey Plaza's.
As Burr.
As Burr. And I'm going to be controversial and yet brave. But I've watched Hamilton, and I've watched the drunk history on Hamilton, and the drunk Hamilton history on Hamilton is better.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah.
Without a doubt, it is the superior piece of media.
I don't have a lot to say on this section. Like, I love the bird. Yeah. I think she's great. I love the noises she makes. I love the puppet. I do think it does a really good job of like setting up stuff that's going to be paid off later. I think it's really funny that the kids shoot at cops. I think that rules.
Yeah, I have a
no
note
problems
sort of
I do have a note about that. That was really
I do
funny.
really love, actually, I'll jump to my very last note. I love the cops don't shoot back. Or
Right.
they're
Well, 'cause
they're
they
not
know
like
that
trying
they're
to
the
down the
kids are
ship.
on there.
They shoot
Yeah.
with
They
ion, yeah.
Yeah, they're finding out that there's kids on there. So it's not, the kids are in this really intense dogfight. And like Kh'ymm brings up at the end, like, why'd you let them get away? And the pilot does a thing that definitely would not happen with cops in real life and says, well, we didn't want to endanger the kids, so we were playing it safe. Good for you, random New Republic X-Wing fighter.
I like that they knew that. Well, because Kim told them, these are kids, they need your help. Come. I mean, we didn't see it in so many words, but apparently we know the cops know that there's kids on the ship. So they're like, nah, we're not going to shoot this down. But I love the kids are going to go ahead and shoot them. They must be like, oh, God damn it. Like these fucking kids.
Yeah. One really interesting through line with this show is there's a theme of the relationship between being an adult and being an adult around children and how you as an adult interact with children. Because we do see really two types of people in this show broadly outside of At-Atten, which has the relationship between the parents and the kids is much more nuanced. But we see people who broadly are treating these kids either like adult or as something that they can use to further their own ends. So Jod, the guy in the next episode who we'll fucking talk about when we get there, Brutus, the pirates, and then we have people like Melna and Kh'ymm and the X-Wing pilots who are being like, no, these are kids and we need to be consciously aware that these are kids and tailor our actions accordingly. I think it would have been really easy for the show to have engaged in this giant X-Wing dogfight that would have looked cool, but then it would have been like, why are you shooting lasers at children?
Yeah.
I like that they put the thought into it to be like, no, they know there's kids on board. They're not going to do that. Hey, do we want to have a little Star Wars pirate corner here for a minute? Because there's something real fucking interesting in this episode. Kh'ymm refers to Jod as Crimson Jack. Crimson Jack is one of the oldest Star Wars concepts outside of the movies. Quoting the StarWars.com trivia guide for Skeleton Crew. Shout out to whoever writes these trivia guides, by the way. You are the real legend here. Quote, Jod's alias of Crimson Jack is an old pirate that first appeared in the original Marvel run of Star Wars comics, starting with issue number 7, published in 1977. End quote. I'm ending the quote there because about to say much nicer what I'm about to say. He also appeared and was recanonized in those fuck ass god awful Halcyon comics that they made to come out to promote the Halcyon Star Cruiser when it was being shoved into everything. Yeah, the comics are bad. Don't read them. They're so bad that I had to apologize to Clone Wars era Anakin Skywalker. I was like, buddy, there's no nuance here. You were done dirty by these comics. Crimson Jack, that's what recanonized him. So it's an indication, it's both an indication Jod lies about who he is a lot, but also like a deep piece of Star Wars lore, because pirates date all the way back to A New Hope.
In the original comic run, he robbed Han of the reward from Yavin. And so Han was like, well, I guess we better go blow up the Death Star because Crimson Jack stole the money and we can't go pay off Jabba now, which is funny that Han didn't really have a change of heart in the original Legends continuity. He just got robbed.
I mean, that is very Legends Han. Let's be real here. Legends Han takes a lot longer to go through his character arc than canon Han does, which in some ways makes him more interesting in the long run, to me at least. That he kind of takes a little longer, because canon by roundabout Return of the Jedi, he's basically completed his character arc, and I don't think anything has quite known what to do with him between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, except Last Shot. I think Last Shot did something really fun with him, but other than that, they haven't known what to do with him. Because it's like, other than him fucking off in the Chuck Wendig books to go liberate Kashyyyk, which was good and correct. I do love the Aftermath books.
They're good books.
They are good books. I love that Kh'ymm is very Dark Crystal. Did y'all watch Dark Crystal Age of Resistance?
No.
Okay. She's very Dark Crystal. There's about 5 people in the audience that are going to understand what I mean by that, and those 5 people are all agreeing with me. I also love that the kids missed the entire plot of Star Wars.
Oh, where she mentions Alderaan.
She mentions Alderaan.
Missed the war.
There's some weird timeline stuff going on, because the way they talk about At-Aten in this episode, it sounds like nobody's heard of At-Aten for like hundreds of years. And like the only record we have of At-Aten is on this like scroll, like this literal physical paper. That's how old it is. And yet we will also learn in episode 8 that at least the supervisor is aware of the events of Revenge of the Sith. Because I can't believe for a second that Sheev Palpatine knew he had a giant money printing planet and did not either A, leave the money printing planet printing money for him, or B, immediately send several Star Destroyers to plunder the money printing planet.
Yeah, the timeline's a little funny because you're right. They do mention, I guess later on, Revenge of the Sith happens, the very last thing they know about the outside world. But it's kind of like, well, then that means up until that point, there was still the, whatever they call it, person coming down to make sure everything's going good. And then
Valorum hid the information when Sheev took power. Valorum was
so.
like, I can't let Sheev know about this place.
You know what? Headcanon accepted.
I guess so.
Yeah, I have to imagine it was so like deep in the banking system somewhere that like Sheev just had bigger things to worry about.
Yeah, but also they're making Old Republic credits. Like, so it's not like they're like not making regular credits like there. So it would be one thing if they were making like whatever credits they use from, Phantom Menace to Revenge of the Sith, like whatever that currency, I'm assuming that's just regular currency credits. But then before
they're
that would
making
be
the
Old
like
Republic
Imperial
credits.
credit.
Right.
The supervisor
New
could have
Republic.
been getting information without sending information out, though.
That's
So-
what I'm thinking probably
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Is this the supervisor could watch the plot of Star Wars but choose when to interact with it,
Right.
and was like,
And stopped
I
right
don't know
after.
if I want to be involved in all this that's happening.
Right.
Couple of things about Jod really quickly at the end of the episode. I do love how they use the term scoundrel to describe him. Scoundrel has always meant a very specific thing in Star Wars. It's kind of in a heroic bent. Like when you want to say somebody's a pirate, but you don't want to describe them as a pirate in Star Wars, you say scoundrel. I like here it actually means he's a fuck ass bitch.
There are 2 genders when it comes to outlaws in Star Wars. There's scum and villainy, which is the bad gender, and there's scoundrel, which is the good gender, typically.
That's so true. But you're right.
Yeah,
In this one, it's like, nah, he's gonna screw you guys over. So make sure you guys don't listen to him.
Yeah, I also like that again with we're setting up an obvious stupid mystery, but then we're resolving it almost immediately so we can get into something more interesting. I like how he pretty much confirms for most of the kids at the end of the episode, yeah, he's not a fucking Jedi.
Right.
He's full of shit.
And I love how they're like, I knew it, kind of thing. Like, and Wim just he's just like, God damn it. Like, you guys, I was rooting for this guy.
Well, Wim will have that moment later because
Yeah.
I think he really gets that moment later. But I also think shout out to Jude Law's, beautiful, beautiful face. I love that we can actually watch when KB's like, you work for us now. You can literally watch him get super annoyed and like put the mask back on, which I really just shout out to Jude Law. That was incredible facial acting that he did. Like watching this back in hindsight, knowing where the show is going, he put so much into this character that's not apparent the first time you watch it. My final note for this episode, and one thing that I really like here, is that this is not Carson Teva. This is just some random X-Wing pilot. And I'm continuing my crusade of this show made me so happy by not shoving a bunch of people into it for us to go, look, it's that person. Like Vane's here, but for like no reason. And
Doesn't do anything. It kind of annoys me, actually.
It annoys us.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Thing. Don't like the fact that Vane's here. We don't love that he's.
I thought that it should have been more explicit that Vane maybe was Brutus's number 2.
Pirates switch crews all the time and crews splinter and reform all the time, like Andy's Pirate Corner again. Charles Vane and Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny all sailed under Benjamin Hornigold, and then they each split and formed their own crew. And like Edward Teach had people split from him and form their own crews. Like that was just a thing that happened where like you disagree with this captain, or you've just gotten like established enough, you break off with some of your pals and you start your own crew. So Vane kind of like leaving one crew to join another crew would have like made sense. They could have done something interesting with it, and they just don't.
I think that's where it catches me. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It makes complete sense. Even me watching Mando season 3, I was like, yeah, obviously the pirate's gonna fucking bail the second you start losing the fight. Mm-hmm. These are not trustworthy people. On the other hand, they made a big deal about how he was going to come be in Skeleton Crew, and then he's just kind of here.
Yeah.
I do like that, like, speaking to how this is not the cameo show, the reason I like that a lot is it makes the galaxy feel big and unexplored in a way that I think Star Wars media, and in fact, a lot of media actually, you can get bogged down once you've built a lot of lore about like, it feels less adventurous. And this show really wanted to feel like an adventure. So having touch points we, the audience, could point to and be like, yes, that is Carson Teva. I recognize that X-Wing pilot. That is the X-Wing pilot. No, there's other X-Wing pilots, and they're just here.
I will say though, like if we had been on the other timeline where Rogue Squadron actually came out, and there would have been a full cast of like, all these different X-Wing pilots that we grew to love and know their names and all these things. One of them would have shown up here at some point, or we would have gotten, instead of Carson Teva as the only X-Wing pilot we know by name, it would have been like, okay, here's a bunch of other ones that randomly can show up, or maybe here's another person that just like we went off and did something during their show, but then they came back in this one and we're like, it's that person. Like, I mean, we're never, never say never, because who knows what Celebration will bring us, but I still doubt that. I mean, I know
the amount of whiskey I will be drinking.
Yeah, I
at Celebration. That's what
who
it's
knows.
You mean sake?
Yes, sake.
Sake,
yeah. It'll be sake because I'll
about?
be in Japan.
Yeah. So
I will say, if you want X-Wing stories about a rogue squadron that is doing stuff throughout this period, may I recommend the re-releases of some of the X-Wing books from the original Legends series. Some of them have gotten Essential Legends, at least one has gotten Essential Legends re-release. And the problem I found, this is a complete Charles tangent, I've been listening to Legends audiobooks at work when I'm not listening to Andy Serkis read me The Lord of the Rings, obviously. And most of them I found are abridged, which is great because I can get through them faster. But it's also sad because I'm not getting the whole thing. The new Essential Legends collection has been re-recording the audiobooks unabridged and adding the sound effects and adding the stuff that's not in the originals that were produced in the 2000s. Sam Witwer reads Maul Shadowhunter So if you want 12 hours of Sam Witwer's glorious, glorious voice in your ears, but also a really good Darth Maul story from the time before Darth Maul had all that lore and he was just a guy that killed people, highly recommend Maul Shadowhunter. And I do know at least one of the X-Wing books has gotten that.
I think the
Nobody's made a
first 3 or
gold,
4.
yeah, nobody's made a Gold Squadron book
Yeah, where's our
at
Gold
all. Where's our
Squadron
book? Where's our fucking book? Okay. They did Alphabet Squadron, which you had a Y-Wing, but like that's not the same. Andy, you are the guest. We will let you go first. Do you have any final thoughts on whatever this episode was called? Very interesting as a astro fucking word I'm not going to look at problem.
My final thoughts, Charles, is that you were wrong on Blue Sky when you referred to Long John Silver as the villain of Treasure Island. And I'm going to recommend the audiobook that Audible released in 2017. It's an Audible original. It's a full cast recording of Treasure Island, and it is my favorite adaptation of Treasure Island. It's fantastic, but Long John Silver, in my humble opinion, is not the villain of Treasure Island. And if anyone believes differently, they can see me in a Denny's parking lot at 4 a.m. where I will fight them with a broken bottle.
So, Star Wars fans, all right, Star Wars fans, all of you pay attention to what I'm about to say, because this is super easy. You can do this with anything. It's real simple. Thank you, Andy. You are more knowledgeable about this than I am, and I will definitely follow up your recommendation and reevaluate accordingly. You see how fucking easy that was?
No, they could never.
They could fucking... If they did, then they wouldn't be in the comments of any of our videos bitching at each other and giving me
that's
free
fair.
engagement. Lord in heaven. Bradley, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
Well, first I'll just say real quick. Last week, same directed by and written by, and we didn't
Okay,
have any
there we
changes,
go.
so there's nothing new here. David
Great, we can
Lowery
skip that
and
section.
Christopher Ford and John Watts. My final thoughts for this episode, like I said before, I think it's 2 episodes that are split up, and it's kind of this last bit, like this last section we just talked about, is really its own episode. Like this whole Kh'ymm section, I honestly think they should have done a side quest. I think it would have made a better episode. Yes, it might have made the season a tad too long or whatever, but this is kind of like where the side quest kind of comes in. I know we do a side quest next episode technically,
Yes.
but this is also a good shoe-in for a side quest because one, it gives Kh'ymm more to do, and then also makes her in the story longer, which I would appreciate because I just like her character. And I just think, yeah, like instead of her like, okay, I'm just gonna real quick coordinate these things, like, and then just magically, do as Machina give you the coordinates. I need them to like have her be like, oh, I need this part for my machine that helps me calculate the coordinates. It's on the other side of the moon. Can you go get it? There's a monster over there. I can't get it by myself right now. Like, stuff like that. Or maybe she just has them do that just to distract Jod until the X-Wings get there. There's ways to make it like make sense where it's not like so like too much of the F word filler. But I think I think this was a fine episode. I just think that there was ways to make it better. I don't think it's just okay. Like there's nothing like super crazy about it, but yeah.
So my final thought is I'm going to agree with Bradley, but disagree on the fix. For me, like I said at the beginning, I think that if Kh'ymm had some narrative, some way to have her have a narrative to where she was more involved in the first act of sort of the first half of this episode, maybe if Jod is able to contact her before they leave Port Borgo, maybe if we even get one little stinger at the top of the episode, we had the parents, but let's be real, that could have been in the next episode. Like that could have gone anywhere. It could have gone at the end of the episode.
It really,
I think might have worked.
Yeah.
I think might have worked better at the end of the episode, frankly. I think a little reorganization of the episode was what would have been in order. I don't think they necessarily needed to add a Bad Batch style, we're going to go do this to solve the problem that's immediate on hand. But I do think that they could have definitely reorganized it in such a way that it could have worked a little bit better. It still works, but it could have worked a little bit better. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Where, if people want to see all 4 of Andy's Pirate Corners, can they find you?
On social medias, I'm at a One Hat Town. You can listen to my podcast, Genders, Queers, and Buccaneers. And yeah, I'll be at Celebration Japan. So if you are going to be at Celebration Japan, hit me up, say hi. I'll also be at KatsuCon coming up in February. So hit me up, say hi there. And that's where you can find me.
Cool. Bradley does a bunch of reality TV, and you can find a bunch of stuff that he has worked on Peacock and Bravo. Please watch it. We want to keep him employed. That is such shows as Temptation Island, Queen's Court, Married to Medicine Season 10, and The Circle on Netflix. Bradley, you're going to have one of those to announce anytime remotely fucking soon.
You know what? Valentine's Day is coming up, so I hope something comes soon. Maybe there'll be
wonder-
something there. Maybe they'll wait until summer. Who knows?
Maybe. I hope so, because I'm getting sick of repeating that same spiel. You can find me on an absolute fuckload of places. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice, in which I play the character of Wynn. We are not pirates, but we're kind of pirates. Let's be real. You can also find books that I write. Those are gay mystery thriller series set in the adult film industry. You can find those on Amazon Kindle under the name Beach House Studios. Third book is coming soon. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because we brought up Legends a bunch on this show, tickets are available to Legends Expo in September in Burbank, California. I am on the volunteer team for that convention. If you are interested in Legends, definitely check out Legends Expo. You can check out our website. Even if you haven't ever consumed a Legends thing and you just love Star Wars and you want to know what this Legends thing's about, there's some great fucking panels that are going to be there that will happily explain to you what the fuck is going on. Well, Andy, thank you once again for coming out. I am glad we were able to pick your brain of pirate knowledge. And Bradley, we will be back next week with another guest for whatever the fuck the next episode is called. I'm not going to check. Please run our socials. Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com and let us know. You can follow us on BlueSky, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post full episodes of this podcast. If you like the podcast, you can also rate us and review us on your favorite podcast app of choice. Please join us next week and every week for another episode of Gold Squadron Gaze.
I was literally about to say one of these glorious days we will do our Once Upon a Time podcast where we talk about season 3 and they go to Neverland. And I swear to God,
we're not doing a Once Upon a Time
Peter
podcast.
Pan in that season.
We're doing Teen Wolf or nothing. Fuck you, shut up.
It is a tragedy that they recast Robin Hood in that show. Because his first appearance was the guy who plays Lucifer in the show Lucifer.
I know.
And is incredible Robin Hood. And then they replace him with the biggest wet blanket ever. And if you think I'm obsessed with pirates, you should hear me talk about Robin Hood, because I have many opinions about Robin Hood.
And my last thing about that will be Fox version or regular version.
Porque no los dos. Give me both.